It's the first week of my defense of that championship belt right there in Code 3 Fantasy Football. Guys, welcome back to another great season. This is going to be week one's video review. I'm going to do these every single week just like this. I hope you guys enjoy them. And hey, if you guys want to be on the show, give me a call. You know, we can sit here and bullshit about football if you want. I'll hook you up to the microphone and we can chat. Let's jump right into this thing here. We're going to get our first matchup of the week out of the way. And the newcomer, Mark Wilton, comes in and makes a statement, taking down Sergio Landa this week, 148-91. Mark got a great performance from Deshaun Watson and still had the top scorer of the week, Lamar Jackson, on the bench. You know, when you can put the highest scoring guy of the week on your bench and still beat a guy by over 50 points, you know, I think you'll take that every week. His wide receiving core put up 51 points of Hilton, Gordon, and Sutton. His running backs put up over 40 of McCaffrey and Phillip Lindsay. I would question whether Phillip Lindsay is going to be the guy going forward in Denver, but he's also got Royce Freeman, so no matter what they do, Mark's got a stranglehold on the running back situation in Denver. Plus, looming in the background somewhere is Kareem Hunt. So, you know, if he can keep McCaffrey healthy and make a decision on what's going on at Denver's Denver's running back situation, you know, he'll have a good season. He'll have a good season there. Tight end disappointed. That was Noah Fant, also a Denver product. At the flex, he has Adam Thielen. So his wide receiving core is T.Y. Hilton, Josh Gordon, Cortland Sutton, Adam Thielen, Robbie Anderson. That's a really solid top 5 wide receivers right there. And, you know, though his running back situation is pretty weak after McCaffrey, I feel like this is a team that could probably do a lot of damage here. And, you know, Mark comes with a ton of hype from his hype man Hal. So we'll see if he's able to continue this. But putting down a team like Sergio, who is a perennial playoff, you know, contender, just hasn't gotten over the hump to get a championship like that one. I'll see what Mark's capable of. For Sergio this week, he gets a disappointing week for Baker Mayfield. You know, only 4.5 points this week. The Tennessee defense apparently had him running for his life a lot. He threw 3 picks. You know, I don't know if I necessarily believe in the Cleveland Browns this year, but we'll see if they're capable of putting it all together with a rookie manager and, you know, a diva wide receiver and a second-year quarterback, and we'll see. As wide receivers tried to keep pace with Marks there, 42 points out of them. Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, and Stephon Diggs. You know, when Allen Robinson went off for over 15 on Thursday night, I thought this was okay. Another week for Sergio, another great game. But then we saw Aaron Jones also only put up 4 points, and pair that with Saquon Barkley, and it's only 22 points out of them. So you get half the production from Saquon Barkley and Aaron Jones that Mark does out of Christian McCaffrey and Phillip Lindsay. You know, these guys were, 1-2 or 1-3 overall for the in the draft. Yeah, 1-3 overall in the draft. So when you see somebody like Barkley get doubled up by McCaffrey and the other 2 guys underperform, you wonder if maybe McCaffrey was actually the number 1 overall, will be the number 1 overall point scorer this year. We'll see. It's a long way to go there. But, you know, Barkley is going to be on a bad Giants team, and McCaffrey hopefully plays on a much better Carolina team. Tight end position, Vance McDonald only got 40 yards. It's better than Noah Fant, but not by much. Tariq Cohen did not perform either. That game Thursday night was just it was brutal to watch. You know, the 13 combined points scored. It was just brutal. But Allen Robinson appeared to be the only guy who could get out of there with a decent fantasy production. You know, you add in 13 points from the kickers and the defense, and you've got a pretty disappointing game out of Sergio this week. I'm sure he wants Baker Mayfield to perform better. I'm sure he expects Stephon Diggs to not be just completely blanketed all game. And I'm sure he expects better out of Jones, Cohen, and the rest of his running back core. It looks like he does lose Darius Geis this week to a knee injury. But he ended up dropping Geis for Malcolm Brown and dropped Kalen Ballage for Terry McLaurin this week. McLaurin's going to be a nice fourth wide receiver, it looks like, because Anthony Miller was just not thrown to this week. So he all of a sudden slides into the number 4 on this team. His running backs are interesting enough. Like Malcolm Brown is his number 3 or either the 3 or the 4 on any given week, with every opportunity to jump up to the number 2 if anything were to happen to Todd Gurley. Mark's skill position players, the wide receivers and the running backs, put up a combined 95 points this week. That would have outscored Sergio's entire team. So that's 5 guys outscoring Sergio's entire team. Pretty disappointing. Mark takes over first place overall and is standing atop the Bravo division. Sergio, unfortunately, takes 9th place, and we'll see what happens moving on. Second matchup I'm going to highlight this week is going to be the other newcomer to the league this year, Matthew Trousdale, who came in with a house of fire, threatening my championship, and he gets a 2-time champion first game out the gate and takes it to him. Whoops up on Hal by about 30 points, gets a great game out of Breeze this week, gets 39 points out of Hopkins, Cooks, and Landry as wide receiving core, and leaves, 42, almost 43 points out of Sammy Watkins on his bench. If he has that in his lineup instead of Brandon Cooks's, less than 4, this game is a much bigger blowout. The running backs, Mark Ingram performs for him really well. James Conner, not so much. Be interesting to see what happens with him going forward, because after those 2 guys, the running backs on Matthew's team is not very good. After those 2, it's Adrian Peterson and it's Dion Lewis. Those 2, one of them was not a football player this past Sunday, and the other sure didn't act like it, only putting up 13 total yards. Tight end was Njoku. It was a good performance out of him. Mohamed Sanu gave him 57 yards in the flex position, and the kicker and defense put up 28. When you look at this matchup, the kicker and defense is very lopsided. But the rest of it is very, it's comparable. It's comparable. The running backs is not so much, but so if you look at the kicker and defense and running backs, it's probably where Matthew gets the bulk of the win here. For Hal this week, 35, almost 36 points out of Patrick Mahomes, his number 1 player, the number 9 player off the board this year. But he is tagged with the questionable tag, so I don't know if something's going on there or if this is just Andy Reid playing the Bill Belichick game. He's going to be playing every single week for Hal. I don't blame him. This kid is the wave of the future. Wide receivers did not perform. Only 25, almost 26 points from Edelman, Westbrook, and Kirk. The running backs were a disappointment. 18.5 points from Gurley and James White. The tight end was Zach Ertz, 5.5 points. He did leave almost over 24 points from some kid named Hawkinson. Is that kid going to be for real? I mean, that really depends on what you call for real. Is Detroit going to play from behind a lot this year? Yeah, probably. So, are they going to go downfield a lot to this tight end? Maybe. Depends on if Marvin Jones keeps up his season. Depends on if Kenny Golladay is still good. They're going to get a lot of touches for Kerryon Johnson this year. So, at best, he's the number 4 option in Detroit. And it's not like Detroit is this high-powered, slinging offense. they probably want to run the ball with Kerryon Johnson as much as possible. So it's going to be interesting to see if this is just a sort of flash in the pan or if this is, the next big tight end. Finally, the flex position, he gets 20 points out of Michael Gallup. Now, if the Cowboys offense is going to perform the way they did against the Giants week 1, look the fuck out. This team might be going to the Super Bowl. And Michael Gallup is going to fall into that Terrence Williams, that number 2 wide receiver position that, they let Terrence Williams walk for this guy. And in the first week, he performs quite admirably, 158 yards. And Hal gets him as his wide receiver 4. After him is Cody Latimer and Jamison Crowder. The wide receivers are very, very solid here for Hal's team. There's no over-the-top, high-end wide receiver of like Julio Jones or Antonio Brown or Juju Smith-Schuster. But what you've got here is a really good, solid group of guys with a lot of breakout potential. Christian Kirk, Michael Gallup, Jamison Crowder. Those 3 guys have real breakout potential. I do have a question, though. Cody Latimer, what are you expecting from him precisely? Like, it's the Giants. They suck. Hal did waste his waiver position this week, dropping Philadelphia's defense for Kansas City and then immediately dropping Kansas City's defense for Houston's defense after waivers cleared. What are you doing? Like, now you've just burned your waiver position, and it's pretty disappointing. Like, you do understand how waivers work, right, Hal? Matthews' wide receiving core looks even more dangerous with Tyreek Hill going down. So, like, Hopkins, Cooks, Landry, Sammy Watkins now slides into, his number 2, I think? James Washington could very well be the number 2 in Pittsburgh. And Marquise Goodwin was a really good wide receiver for the Niners last year. Only gets 7 yards this week, but we'll see if, he bounces back next week or if this is just a guy that becomes fodder on the wire. Hal's skill position players scored only 1.25 points. So all 5 of his guys, Edelman, Westbrook, Kirk, Gurley, and White, only scored 1.25 points more than Sammy Watkins alone. Now, Watkins wasn't even in the lineup, but this was a 30-point win. Credit to Matthew. He's gonna be a contender this year, and he's the type of guy who's gonna talk some shit along the way too. So watch out for him. Comments below. Moving on to the next matchup here. Former champion Anthony Millard took on Gabe Porras here, and Anthony gets the win by about 40 or so, 45 points or so. Does not get a good performance out of Jared Goff at his quarterback position this week. Only 186 yards and a touchdown with a pick. He left 33 points from Matthew Stafford on the bench. I don't know if that's going to be a thing where he's making a decision every week between those 2 guys. But, if so, I'd probably lean Goff in most situations. It's just this particular week, Stafford in Arizona was probably the better play. West Coast team going east. Carolina's got an okay defense. Arizona's kind of shit. His wide receivers this week put up almost 30 from Ridley, Galladay, and Fuller. Fuller was kind of a disappointment, only got 69 nice yards. His running backs were where it's at, though. Dalvin Cook and Chris Carson put up over 47 points. Dalvin Cook, 111 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Carson, 2 all-purpose touchdowns with 46 rushing yards. This guy is probably going to run away with the Seattle running back job, pushing Rashad Penny to a backup role. Dalvin Cook is the workhorse, and they want to work him, in Minnesota. He is going to run the ball a ton. I could see this guy leading the league in rushing yards this year. We'll see what happens there. Tight end Greg Olsen is as old as I am, and he did not put up very many points and is already tagged with a questionable tag because he hurt his back. Congratulations, you drafted the old guy. Flex position, Marlon Mack. another really strong performance, and that's probably the difference in this matchup is the flex position, because where Anthony got 30 plus, Gabe only got 2.5 from Miles Sanders, so rough to see. Kicker and defense is 10 from Crosby and Dallas's D. From Gabe, he gets Phillip Rivers, really nice performance, 28.5 points, 333 passing yards and 3 TDs. The wide receiving core was abysmal. OBJ, DJ Moore, Corey Davis only combined for 12.5 points. That is just 0.3 of a point more than Calvin Ridley put up this week. OBJ had 71 yards. Corey Davis caught as many passes as I did this week. And he left Deshaun Jackson's 32.5 and Emmanuel Sanders' 14.5 on the bench. Both those guys outscored the 3 guys he actually played. His running backs, David Johnson gave him a good game. David Montgomery did not. Only 45 all-purpose yards. The running backs on this team are really interesting because you got David Johnson, who's obviously the number 1, but then Montgomery's a rookie, and that's a question mark. Miles Sanders is a rookie, and that's a question mark. And Ronald Jones is not the starter in Tampa. So those are his running backs on this team. His wide receiving core is stupid deep with OBJ, DJ Moore, Corey Davis, Emmanuel Sanders, Deshaun Jackson, Sterling Shepard, and Golden Tate. You got 7 wide receivers, Gabe. Do you need that many? George Kittle, disappointing game at tight end. Miles Sanders, I talked about. And then kicker and defense, Michael Badgley didn't play. He was he has a groin injury, and yet he was still in the lineup for Gabe. I'm going to call that the dumbass move of the week. No waiver additions this week. Anthony's running back trio, though, looks incredibly strong. Cook, Carson, and Mack. 3 guys that weren't talked about as much in the preseason as Barkley and Zeke and McCaffrey and Kamara and Le'Veon Bell. Those are the top 5 guys in my opinion. And after that, it's Dalvin Cook. And then, Marlon Mack, the question was about Andrew Luck. How much are they going to have to lean on him this year? Carson, the question was whether or not he's got the full-time job in Seattle. If this is going to be an indication of what is to come from this trio of running backs, Anthony's in for a great season. Move on to Mark's Mangina, Frank Marchione. When you name yourself something like that, and I introduce you that way, it almost sounds like you're being insulted, Frank. Mark's Mangina, Frank Marchione. Think about it. He took on and got Melvin the McKinneys. The McKinneys had an awful week this week. Frank got over almost 33 points from Carson Wentz and left almost 44 points on the bench from Dak Prescott. If those two are going to perform like this all year, Frank's in for a great year. His wide receivers somewhat disappointed. Only put up 21 points from Tyreek Hill, Robert Woods, and Tyler Lockett. He did leave 21.5 from Tyrell Williams on the bench, and loses Tyreek Hill from anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks with the broken collarbone. The running backs definitely did perform. Austin Eckler was great, and Damian Williams was serviceable, putting up almost 46 points from the 2 of them. However, Josh Jacobs' 23.5 points were left on the bench. Probably wants to get him into the lineup going forward. But this running back core on Frank's team is even better than Anthony's. It's Damian Williams, it's Ezekiel Elliott, who I haven't talked about, and for whatever reason was in the flex spot this week. It's Austin Eckler, who put up a great first week, and Josh Jacobs. If those 4 guys are going to be what we think they can be, this is going to be a dangerous team. The question is whether or not the wide receivers can keep up, because Tyreek Hill is now down. Robert Woods may not be the number 1 in LA. Tyler Lockett is going to have to carry the load in Seattle. And other wide receivers on the team, Marvin Jones, is he the guy in Detroit? And is Tyrell Williams for real? We'll see if those wide receivers hold up for Frank. Jared Cook was a pretty pretty big disappointment at tight end, only 37 yards. And kicker and defense put up 22 for him. For the McKinneys, it was a rough week. It was a really rough week. Aaron Rodgers was abysmal in that game in Chicago on Thursday. Their wide receiving core only put up 12 points. Julio Jones, Mike Williams, and Geronimo Allison. Geronimo Allison caught as many passes as I did this week. In fact, he was also targeted as many times as I was. That's fantastic. Doesn't sound like he's going to be the number 2 guy. It's probably going to be Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But, it was a smart idea to grab Allison. If he runs away with the job, great for him. Running backs, again, a big disappointment. Latavius Murray as their number 2 does perform as well as could be expected, but Joe Mixon going down with an ankle injury could be catastrophic to this roster. Only 1.5 points this week. Add in the fact that they've rostered A.J. Green, who's down with a foot injury, and they've rostered Melvin Gordon, who's holding out. If Joe Mixon misses time, this team is going to be in trouble in a hurry. They do not have a running back other than Duke Johnson that can slide in there. And then you lose him at the flex position, and you're having to choose between, Mark Andrews, who put up a great game instead of on the bench in lieu of Austin Hooper's 7.5. But you're going to run into a situation where you're going to have to find guys week to week to plug in with this much on your bench. That is just kind of dead weight. AJ Green is dead weight until he plays. Melvin Gordon, dead weight until he plays. And now Joe Mixon becomes another, kind of casualty. The kicker and defense, they put up 10 points. Greg Zuerlein put up 14, and Jacksonville got blown the fuck out. I wonder if it was maybe by design, like Jacksonville's defense is supposed to be better this year than it was last year. Probably not as good as 2 years ago. But they played Kansas City, and you knew they were playing Kansas City in the first week. Wouldn't it have been, a good idea to drop AJ Green or Melvin Gordon into the IR slot, which we have for that, and pick up a defense, any defense that scores more than -4 points? I mean, this was just a bad first week from the McKinneys. I hope they bounce back. Waiver additions this week. Frank drops the New Orleans defense for Carolina and adds DK Metcalf. And the running backs on Frank's team, the combination of Austin Eckler and Damian Williams, put up only 13 and change, almost 14 points fewer than the McKinney's entire team. It was a very, very bad week. They sit in last place. Frank, 4th place in second place of the Bravo division, behind Syphilitic Frank's Mark Wilton. It's going to get confusing. You guys need to be more creative with your insults. Moving on. Hanging with Hernandez, Corey Stearns takes on Plaxico Schunig, Chris Chapman. Corey gets a big win here, and I'm kind of surprised. This is a team that I didn't think was going to be very good coming into the season. I didn't like the way he drafted this team, and he's proven me wrong in 1 week. Tom Brady gives him a great performance, 33.5 points. His wide receiving core of Marquise Brown, Alshon Jeffrey, and Devontae Adams put up over 50, almost 50.5. And it's a good week when you win by 25 points or so, and Devontae Adams is your lowest scoring wide receiver. This is going to be a much better wide receiver for the rest of the season than what he showed this week. That game in Chicago was awful. But Marquise Brown all of a sudden becomes the guy in Baltimore. The team put up 59 points. He put up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just ridiculous. His wide receivers his running backs kind of disappointed there. Nick Chubb and Kerryon Johnson only combined for about 14.5. I expect better, but these are 2 teams I'm not believing in very much. I don't believe in Detroit at all. And I don't believe that Cleveland's going to be as good as people are hyping them up to be. So if those teams are playing from behind, they're not going to run very much. O.J. Howard was a disaster at tight end. Devontae Freeman was a disaster at flex position. And the combination of Gostowski and New England put up 25 points. So that's a great defense and kicker combo. For Chris, Russell Wilson gave him a serviceable game, 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. His wide receivers were fantastic, 48.5 points from Michael Thomas, Amari Cooper, and Kenny Stills. If those 3 guys can perform the way that I think they can, that's going to be a dangerous trio. Running backs were dreadful. Sony Michel and Kenyon Drake combined to score only half a point more than Devontae Adams alone. That's bad. And that's kind of where the game is lost right there. You know, if he gets a decent performance out of either of those running backs, this is a much different matchup. Hunter Henry gives him 6 points. LaShawn McCoy was serviceable in the flex, and 20 points out of Tucker and the Rams for the kicker and defense. Chris drops Kyle Rudolph for Rob Gronkowski. Do you know something that we don't, Chris? Is Rob Gronkowski really going to come back and make another big target and weapon for Tom Brady in probably his last season? I'm worried about Chris's running backs more than I am Corey's. Sony Michel is in a committee with Bill Belichick at the helm. It could be anybody any week, and there's at least 4 guys that could be, the featured back every week. Kenyon Drake is on a terrible Miami Dolphins team. If they're behind the way they were in this game, they're not going to run the ball very much. LaShawn McCoy, who knows how long he's got, and he's also behind Damian Williams. Nyheim Hines is behind Marlon Mack, who had a huge week. Those 4 guys are his running backs, and it's pretty ugly there. His wide receiving core looks really strong in Thomas, Cooper, and AB, who's going to come back. So a wide receiving core of Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, Amari Cooper, with Kenny Stills in the flex position, that's dangerous. That is a 3-headed monster, and I see Chris riding that for much of the season. Finally, I'm gonna hit my matchup with James McCloskey, the Fantasy Browns this week. Neither of us performed as incredibly as we would have liked, but I get a good win here over James. I get a bad game from Ben Roethlisberger and Juju Smith-Schuster, an okay game out of Chris Godwin, and a bad game out of Tyler Boyd. So those 4 guys all combined for about 32 points. Le'Veon Bell and Derrick Henry carried the load, 45 plus. Travis Kelce gave me 8.5, almost 9 points. Justin Jackson in my flex spot was 6 points, and the kicker and defense was Rosas in Chicago. If I'm honest, I don't necessarily like my team very much. My wide receivers are really boom or bust. My running backs are what I'm going to have to rely on. But after those 2 guys, it's not very promising. It's Justin Jackson, it's Tony Pollard, who I dropped for Chris Thompson, and it's Devin Singletary. If any of those 3 guys don't perform, they're just cannon fodder for the free agent list. So I'll see what I can do here. Getting Travis Kelce in the 3rd round though was huge. So Kelce, Bell, and Juju as my top 3 are good. We'll see if I'm able to parlay this into a defensive that title belt. My flex was Justin. Oh, I went over that already. All right, James has got a really good performance out of Matt Ryan, 21.5 points. His wide receivers did not perform at all. Evans, Kupp, and Moncrief put up a total of 8, just over 8 points. Meanwhile, Larry Fitzgerald put over 22 on his bench. His running backs, Kamara and Fournette, put up 24.5. Evan Ingram was his best player this week, putting up 22.5. And in the flex, Rashad Penny put up almost 2 points. Rex Burkhead gave him 8.5 on the bench, which would have been much better than the almost 2 that he got from Penny. Kicker and defense, 8 points. For James, it's gonna be interesting. He's gonna go as far as Kamara and the Saints and Evans and the Bucks offenses are willing to take him. The Bucks looked pretty bad this week against San Francisco. The New Orleans offense looked amazing on Monday night. Matt Ryan plays in a ton of domes. I think he's going to be a great quarterback this year. Had I been able to get my hands on Julio Jones rather than Juju Smith-Schuster, I probably would have targeted Ryan. But I did what I did. We'll see what James is capable of doing. He's talked about this being his last season in this league. We'll see if that's going to be the case there, and maybe he goes out with a big season. Guys, that's going to do it for this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Critiques and criticisms in the comments below. I'll see you guys next week.